This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. We've got a lot to talk about today, folks. The big question on everyone's mind, is there a retreat from Minnesota by the Trump administration? Or is this just a strategic reset? Donald Trump has indicated that his forces are going to be stepping back. In fact, not just in Minnesota, but the National Guard is being pulled back from places around the country. Immigration authorities are being pulled back around the country. But does this spell policy change, or is it just to buy Donald Trump and his administration time? We will also talk today about DHS funding on the precipice. My former agency that I've worked at under two administrations has become the nuclear football in Washington, D.C., and may spend a very long time without routine funding and support in Washington, given all the controversy that's been inside of DHS. And then today we're going to talk about how the Justice Department is taking it from all sides. After Pam Bondi testified this week, she got criticism from Democrats who are worried that the Justice Department is now monitoring the documents they review related to the Epstein saga, and also from Republicans who are furious that the Attorney General did nothing to answer their questions about the biggest political controversy that's consumed Washington in years. We will talk about all of that and more, including with our special guest today, former White House lawyer Ty Cobb. A lot of questions to ask him, including how he has handled being on the receiving end of Donald Trump's ire. This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. We open today talking about the Department of Homeland Security and all of the swirling controversies. After months of federal immigration operations in Minnesota, operations that left 2 United States citizens dead and sparked national protests, the Trump administration is now saying that, at least for the time being, it's pulling back. Announced by border czar Tom Homan earlier today, this can be seen by many as a sign of retreat by the Trump administration. It certainly is being characterized that way. And while I'm relieved to hear that agents are starting to exit the Twin Cities, which have been devastated by the raids and unconstitutional acts, there's more to this story. Take a look at what Tom Homan had to say.
We've seen a big change here in the last couple of weeks, and it's all good changes. Deployments have dropped dramatically because we have less of that occurring, less of the agitator that crossed that line. That is a good thing. That is a win for everybody. Not just for the safety of law enforcement officers, it's a win for this community. With that, and success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this surge operation began, as well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement, I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue to the next week. We have a lot of work to do across this country to remove public safety risk who shouldn't even be in this country, and to deliver on President Trump's promise for strong border security and mass deportation. Law enforcement officers drawn down from this surge operation will either return to their duty stations or be assigned elsewhere to achieve just that.
Okay, so you listen to what Tom Homan's saying. It sounds like we're leaving, we're going home, but Tom Homan did not clear the operation entirely. In fact, he stated, quote, "For those who say we are backing down from immigration enforcement or the promise of mass deportations, you are simply wrong." And pair that with what we talked about earlier this week, which is immigration officials testifying before the Homeland Security committees in Congress who said that nothing's changed on that front, that their directive from the president is a mass deportation plan. Well, let me tell you this, folks. You can't carry out a mass deportation plan of the scope that they're talking about, a scope that includes dozens of gigantic new warehouses being turned into detention facilities without having these foot soldiers on the ground. So if they're not changing the underlying policy, what's actually changing? Is what is happening in Minnesota just a feint? Is it a chance to buy time and for the administration to recoup? Perhaps. And citizens in Minnesota are at least clear in this moment, though, that dealing with DHS officers in the way that they have been dealing with them, where it's taking a toll on their lives and their livelihoods and their way of life, may be coming to an end for now. And there in Minnesota, Attorney General Keith Ellis was asked how the agency and the federal government have been in collaborating in the investigation on some of those traumatic incidents, like the deaths of Alex Pretti and Renee Good. Take a listen.
Senator, we haven't had any cooperation up until now, which is really unusual because in prior cases where there's been a federal and state interest in a crime, we've seen collaboration between federal and state authorities. It's how we normally do work. It's not unusual at all. And in fact, this situation, when we were told you can't have access to the evidence, to the crime scene, that was highly unusual and surprising to us. And so we're hoping that we can gain cooperation, perhaps in the Pretti matter, but we've been advised that the good matter is the feds are not investigating it, and we still haven't received any access to the evidence that is involved in that case. So it's an unusual, strange situation, but we're with good faith, hoping that things will change.
So that's important. You're saying in the past they've worked with you or other folks.
Yeah.
But in these two cases, they're stonewalling you?
That's a yes. That's a yes.
Wow.
Stonewalling, he says, that's a yes. That was in today's oversight hearing on the Senate side, at which the Minnesota Attorney General testified. And the pressure must be getting to the White House because just moments ago at that same hearing, Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott said his agency will release body camera footage of the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti. Now, I will say, we have a lot of angles of what happened there. I think it's obvious to the American people what happened there. But that additional data point is additional transparency that is needed. Scott did not say when the footage would be released. He said the FBI and CBP are reviewing multiple videos as part of the ongoing investigation and urged the public not to jump to conclusions. Well, in light of that, lawmakers were not buying it. They played a video in the hearing room showing Pretti retreating moments before he was shot. Senator Rand Paul said he did not see de-escalation. Senator Ruben Gallego accused the agencies of creating a command structure where officers feel there is no accountability. And now another theory as to why all of a sudden DHS and Homan are playing nice is that there's a vote right now at this very moment before Congress whether to continue DHS funding. Now, that's going to take place before the deadline tomorrow, Friday the 13th. And there have been efforts to make sure that the department gets funded, including potentially some concessions from the Trump administration. Nevertheless, Washington is on the brink of a Department of Homeland Security shutdown. And this time, Democrats say they are not blinking. Senate Democrats blocked a House funding bill saying they will not continue writing checks for what they describe as an unchecked violent immigration enforcement campaign. Now, the vote failed 52-47. Only Senator John Fetterman broke ranks. Democrats noted that Homan's withdrawal was not enough. It was not reform in their view. It was optics. And they are demanding a number of different things, including no warrantless home entries, no masked agents hiding their identities, mandatory body cameras, and clear federal use of force standards. Senator Jeanne Shaheen put it plainly, quote, "It is not acceptable that we have a federal agency killing American citizens in the streets, and we are not taking any action." Republicans have been warning of the consequences of shutting down the Department of Homeland Security, including airport delays and chaos. But here's the key point of it. ICE and CBP operations will largely continue, even if DHS funding lapses. That's because those agencies already received tens of billions of dollars in funding last year that isn't tied to the routine annual funding bills. So this is not just about shutting down border enforcement. The Democrats are saying It's about broader accountability and forcing accountability. And if that means, in their minds, that they have to shut down other parts of DHS to get that leverage, they're going to do it. Democrats are saying no reforms, no blank check. I want to bring into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. Xander, I think this is one of those things that people saw what happened last year with the shutdown. They felt like there was an opportunity. In this case, it was around healthcare. They felt like there was an opportunity for Democrats to regain some power and leverage over the Trump administration, and they collapsed at the last minute. They basically caved to the administration. They didn't get what they were looking for. I think that that is haunting some of these Democrats, especially in the Senate this go around. What's your read of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, that effort failed in several ways, that first effort. One, it failed in making a clear demand. This demand that we're seeing now should have been the demand the first time around. But they did the usual thing where they polled and went to K Street experts and they said, hey, it's healthcare. Healthcare's popular. Yeah, healthcare is popular, but it's a valid political debate to have versus the rule of law and attacking American citizens lawlessly, deploying troops to American cities. So this is the right fight to have. I don't want to criticize them too much because they're late to the party. It's nice. I'm happy they're here. I'm happy they're fighting. I'm happy they're using the power of the purse and the tools they have to fight. That's what we want to see. That's what we've been asking for, and it's great to see it from them. I'm still shocked by the 47 votes against this. It's that there's no line in the sand. I want to read a famous Benjamin Franklin quote: "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." And we've seen that from the Republicans in this Congress. This is just the tyrannical playbook, and it seems like we've had some cross the line. But the calcification of our political leaders it has just been amazing to watch in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to point out for folks that I think has been interesting to watch is that Democrats have continued this fight despite the thing that I mentioned earlier, that ICE and CBP, they won't be shut down by this. And for folks who don't understand the funding mechanics, something happened last year that's different than the routine funding cycles before Congress. You remember Trump talking about the big, beautiful bill. Now, I remember at the time when Trump was talking about, everyone was focused on what the big, beautiful bill was going to do when it came to Medicare and Medicaid and other social services. Very few people were talking about Stephen Miller's long-held pie-in-the-sky dream, which is that the bill would supercharge ICE into the largest federal law enforcement agency and give it basically a one-time infusion of tens of billions of dollars. So DHS is an agency that typically costs about $65 billion a year to fund. And every year it's got to go back to Congress and say, "Mommy, please give me my allowance," like all other departments and agencies. What was unique about the big, beautiful bill is it basically gave more than the entirety of Homeland Security's annual budget as a one-time lump sum to just one of its agencies, ICE, which it can use over multiple years. So that means when it comes allowance time, ICE and CBP aren't necessarily worried about getting this year's allowance. They already got a huge down payment on the future. They already got this huge chunk of money that they can keep drawing from. Now, Congress can always rescind that. Congress can always pass a bill to pause that. At this moment with a Republican Congress, it seems unlikely. And so what's really happening right now is Democrats know, okay, we can't shut down these agencies, but the rest of DHS didn't get this huge one-time, lump sum. And so to get leverage, they're thinking about, do we shut down the rest of the department? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be able to fly and there's no TSA. During these shutdowns, the government is allowed to keep essential employees in place to carry out important public safety and national security activities. But it will, the longer it runs, create a lot more tension, a lot more headaches, breakdowns in key services that Americans expect from that department, and force a situation in Washington where leaders hopefully will come to the table. Now, there are these, frantic last-minute debates about what those terms might be if they can avoid this. But it seems right now, Xander, that we are careening towards this type of shutdown moment, and it could last a while.
Well, I just want to contextualize. When you said, ICE was supercharged, ICE, based on their budget, would be the 5th largest military in the world. This is just a domestic police force that, if you went by budget, would be the 5th largest military in the world. That is jarring, and speaks to the ambitions of this administration. You don't ask to create that size of a force for no reason in particular.
Mm-hmm. Well, and look, we also have an entity that is operating like a military, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, I say that because the administration has, from a legal standpoint, considered authorities for ICE and others that would allow it to operate more like a military. And we were on the brink of the president potentially invoking the Insurrection Act to justify bringing in the armed forces of the United States into these areas to help facilitate ICE's mission. I mean, they were on the cusp of militarizing this in a much more significant way. And I will just say, that's how the president has long viewed this. I mean, in the first term, we were in a lot of debates with the president from the Department of Homeland Security because he wanted us to take ICE and CBP and effectively supplant them with the U.S. military at the border, in American cities. This gave a lot of people concern, to say the very least, because Trump didn't want it to stop at immigration enforcement. And you are now seeing what that debate looks like, because people are saying that the president wants to use those forces to prevent a free and fair election in 2026. That might have been considered hyperbole years ago, but Donald Trump himself let those things slip in an interview in January when he said he wished he had sent the military to go seize ballots in 2020. And then, of course, weeks later, the FBI goes to one of those sensitive places in Fulton County, Georgia, and does what? It seizes ballots. So this is on the president's mind. The idea that he can use the military, armed forces, even ICE for purposes far beyond immigration. So that's something that's still, I think, on everyone's minds, despite this retreat. Now, we have a guest with us today who I want to bring into the conversation now, and we're going to talk about this and a number of other issues that will come up later in the program. I want to welcome into the conversation Ty Cobb. Many of you have seen him out there on the cable news networks fighting the good fight, talking about the rule of law, talking about defending the rule of law. You may not know that he had been a top lawyer in the first Trump administration, and the man broke ranks because it turns out Ty Cobb has a conscience. Welcome to the program, good sir.
Good to be with you, Miles. How are you guys doing today?
We're great. It's great to have you with us, my friend. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with the fact that, Ty, I got the dubious dishonor last week of being mentioned again by the president, and you did too. But I got the distinct honor of being mentioned in the same message as you. Of course, he went after both of us at the same time. And I'll say one of my first reactions was to reach out to you and say, I'm thrilled to be included in this missive with someone who I have such great respect for. You've stood up on a lot of these issues the past few years, especially on defending the rule of law. And I want to start, Ty, with asking you about what we are seeing at the Department of Homeland Security, what we are seeing across the country with the deployment of ICE agents. It seems like the tide turned publicly as agents really veered into lawless territory. All the reporting about ICE entering homes without warrants, the videos we were seeing every day of agents asking American citizens for their papers, the extraordinary and shocking imagery of Americans being executed, the lawlessness broke through. I think that was academic for a lot of people in 2025. It was, hey, look, this administration keeps breaking the law, but it was on things like the power of the purse and deleting agencies. It wasn't as visceral as, breaking into Americans' homes without warrants. But it seems like that lawlessness, because it became so visceral, really turned the tide here. I want to get your take.
I think that's true. I think to people that were on the fence and didn't know what to believe, the unforgettable videos of the assassinations of Renee Good and Alex Pretti were just very hard to get beyond. And I think even MAGA, which still discounts most of reality, it muted them because, those things were really indefensible. We saw, for example, even today, they've long insisted that Ms. Martinez, who they shot 5 times in her car, They alleged for months that it was because she rammed them and interfered with one of their operations when, as we learned from the release of the video, I guess it was late last night or this morning, they rammed into her. They sideswiped her and then they shot her immediately. I mean, she didn't even take her hands off the steering wheel. And they killed her. I mean, they didn't kill her, but they injured her severely. Thank God she survived. So I think the lies, the violence definitely did turn many of the people that at least were on the fence about the legitimacy and legality of what was going on. It made voices stronger, and it made it harder for them, to persist in that level of activity. Now, I do think, consistent with the discussion you just had, today is not a retreat. Today is, a strategic regathering. They can always go back in. I think the timing has to do a lot with the funding of DHS. I don't think it will be successful in causing the Democrats to retreat this time, although I don't think you can ever really count on Schumer until it's over. He's always capable of walking away from, a principled and important task. Hopefully he won't this time, or his people won't let him. But I think this is, they're not doing anything there other than harassing and terrorizing people. They have, the level of arrests, certainly the arrests of anybody who was a violent criminal or a criminal in any way, they're minimal compared to the people that are being detained, many of whom, as the courts are making clear, should not be detained, as they grant habeas petitions, throughout the day, every day when they can get to them. And hundreds, if not thousands of people are still illegally detained. So I think this is basically, they've shown what they can do. They've tested it. They have a plan. They've done it operationally. They know what works, what doesn't work. So this is, a regathering of the forces to be deployed again when it comes to, elections and other policies and intimidation that they want to bring to bear.
Well, Ty, at defiance.org, we're all about what can we do. It sounds like the public's backlash forced them into retreat, at least temporarily. What would be your recommendation to, Defiance members and the general public? What can we do to make sure the administration stays on its heels?
I think, that's the question I get asked probably more than any other question. And I'm a product of the late 60s, early 70s. I remember being tear gassed after Kent State on the Mall. And I think we have to assemble in as big a numbers as we can. I think you guys are leading the charge on that. I think as I think you have suggested or urged, it's important that those gatherings occur in cities and locations where they can make the most difference. I mean, of the 10 to 15 million people expected to show up in the next No King's Day, it would be great if they all showed up in DC. I think continuing to educate and try to bring around people, calling out the atrocities as you guys do very effectively. It's a combination of education and urgency and selling the urgent message and not letting people become immune to the atrocities that happen every day. I think that's one of the real dangers that we're experiencing is, yesterday we saw Pam Bondi, contort like, she belonged in Cirque du Soleil, and just show a level of disrespect and impropriety that, rarely seen in the halls of Congress historically. But we see these things every day from this administration. Today, they deny science and abandon the, well-studied, easily established underpinnings of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act of, the dangers of pollutants and the ability to regulate. So, the dismantling of all things aspirational in the country is underway. It requires a daily recounting, and people need to understand what's going on, which you guys do a wonderful job of, and they need to continually be urged, not to sit by. You can't, people can't win this battle on, just by watching the news. They have to get out. They have to protest. They have to call their congressman, call their congresswoman daily, and keep the pressure on.
Well, Ty, one of the things that gives me a little bit of confidence is that we are seeing more defections from your and my political side of the aisle. We're seeing more conservatives defecting. We saw it in a big way with the Epstein files. We saw a bunch of conservatives defect from Trump's orbit and go a direction he really didn't want to go. We saw it a little bit around the holidays on healthcare. We had Republicans in the House rejecting this approach about not doing anything and creating no follow-on to the Obamacare healthcare subsidies. We've seen it on a handful of other issues. We almost got there with a war resolution on Venezuela. Republicans were this close to hemming in the administration until Trump worked the phones and he got a couple of spineless people to flip and say, actually, they would give the administration a blank check on Venezuela. But we're seeing this happen on another issue. And I want to play a clip here in a second. On tariffs, Donald Trump, one of his signature issues, he's not getting all the support he wants. In fact, there was a big rebuke of Republicans. And so I'll play this clip from WHAS 11, and then we'll talk about it on the back end.
6:45 on your Thursday morning, and the House has voted to effectively cancel President Trump's Canadian tariffs. In a vote of 219 to 211, 6 Republicans joined all but one House Democrat to pass that resolution yesterday. The resolution would end the national emergency that Trump declared last year to justify imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. Democrats say that the tariffs are harming American households, while House Speaker Mike Johnson argued that Congress should not be getting in the way of Trump's tariffs.
More than 60% of Americans disapprove of these tariffs. They know that the foreign governments don't pay these tariffs. They know that American families do.
The president should be able to conduct his trade policy, which has been very successful.
Now, Trump posted on Truth Social after that vote saying, quote, any Republican in the House or the Senate that votes against tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences come election time, and that includes primaries. That bill now heads to the Senate.
I will say, Ty, that it strikes me the threats aren't working the way that they used to. I mean, not to take the attention back to you and I speaking out against the guy, but on Friday, Donald Trump said, I'm warning you, CNN and MSNBC, don't put these two guys on your airwaves again or you'll be in trouble. And I think the first people you and I heard from weren't friends or family members or colleagues. It was CNN and MS Now saying, hey, y'all want to come on to talk about it? Is people are not intimidated by the threats anymore, including Republicans in Congress. I want to get your thoughts on that.
So I hope that's true. I do think the threats are effective in Congress. I think the 6 people that voted against tariffs, to their extreme credit, and they should all be applauded, are in districts where they still have a fighting chance, even if Trump primaries them from the right. But others, I think, who recognize the folly of, destroying our relationship with Canada, just like the folly of, Trump's efforts to destroy NATO, which I think have unfortunately been successful and, cannot now be overcome. I do think the threats against, Congress people have probably kept 18 to 25, if not 40, Republicans in the Mike Johnson camp, that would otherwise prefer to be out there doing the right thing. So I'm glad to see that people are breaking away. Certainly, they didn't get the unanimity that Johnson typically relies upon, that he had to have for the big beautiful bill that paid off many of Trump's supporters and transactionally, took away monies from ordinary Americans and transferred them to the wealthy, took away almost 200 million acres of public lands and turned them into transactional chess pieces. I think that there are cracks in the dam. This was a big one. I hope it's lasting, but I'm not confident yet.
Well, Xander, I'm going to leave you with the final question, and maybe I have a half question on the back end for you, Ty. But Xander, over to you.
Just a reflection as Ty was naming all these different issues. It feels like maybe the prescription to dealing with muzzle velocity is to wrap all these issues as a corruption issue. We heard that over and over again from the youth leaders we interviewed yesterday. And in an attempt to not have kind of ADD or be chasing Trump wherever he goes, naming all of this as a corruption issue and being able to rally a large coalition of Americans consistently around that issue. And so when the public lands corruption thing comes up, or the IRS $10 billion lawsuit that Trump is now asking taxpayers to pay him comes up, that it doesn't feel like we get moved from left to right, that we can continue to stay focused with the same narrative and the same ask. I think that's what's compelling about this Democrat request with DHS, which is just a follow the law, like work within the rule of the law request. It's so easy to rally around that. And, it's such a big challenge we're facing, because Ty's totally right. I mean, he's listed off 10 crises just in the last 2 minutes that we've been dealing with this administration. And so us collectively finding a rallying cry that we can stick to feels very core to being able to confront this administration with the size of resistance that we need consistently.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Ty.
I was just going to say, so I'm very much there. I think the analogy that I have used is people need to understand that this is a jigsaw puzzle, and we have to help people understand how to solve it, how to put it together. I mean, the pieces are not just the atrocities, but the responses or the consequences. And for example, the absurdity of demoting Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, for along with other people saying that reminding the military personnel who are asked to commit the war crimes that Hegseth and Trump value, that they don't have to follow illegal orders. That's a First Amendment protected right. It's a speech and debate protected right. It's also happens to be true. It cites the uniform. I mean, the verbiage itself comes from the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and Hegseth has acknowledged that in the past. So it's just an absurdity, but they did it. And fortunately today, Judge Leon in DC rebuked them for it, and called out the absurdity of it, and rejected any efforts to punish Kelly in the time being, before moving on to other serious issues raised in the case. So I think there's a yin and a yang here all throughout, whether it's repatriating illegally kidnapped 5-year-olds in Minnesota, whether it's investigating the murders that DHS still refuses to cooperate on, and seeking voting records and illegally seizing voting records. His target is the elections and control of the elections and retaining power. Trump is not going to sit by and go away in November once Democrats take the House, as I expect they will and hope they will. So we've got to stay focused, but we need to basically get those pieces out in a way that people can understand and put them together and see the whole picture in a way that motivates them. So you guys do a great job of that. I applaud you for it. It's been an honor to be with you.
Well, Ty, I got one last one for you, because look, we're in a moment where someone like you're a former federal prosecutor, you're a former White House lawyer, you're a former defense attorney. You know all the different sides of this. If a doctor sees a patient bleeding out on the table, they probably reach a quick assessment of, here's what's going on. It's terminal. It's not terminal. I want, as a rule of law doctor, your assessment of where we are at right now. And I know you're not going to sugarcoat it for me. Is it as bad as you expected it to be right now? Is it worse? And what's your prognosis for 2026, especially with Trump focusing all of this legal firepower on the elections?
Oh, it's far worse than I think anybody could have ever imagined. I mean, the talent and experience in the Justice Department has been hollowed out. We now have, the Justice Department asking its employees, including prosecutors, to identify judges that they view as anti-Trump, so that they can be defied and ridiculed and threatened. These are, as far as the rule of law goes, it's it has eroded very, very quickly and much faster than I think anybody anticipated was possible. There's really no distinction now between our Department of Justice and the secret police or Gestapo or KGB. It's there only for revenge and persecution and intimidation. And we saw Pam Bondi yesterday. I mean, the level of respect she has for America and its norms, is zero. So I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat what's happened to the rule of law. The only savior is the judges, and Trump knows that, and Bondi knows that, and that's why they're ridiculing him and trying to undermine him at every stage. Any judge that rules against Trump, whether he's a Trump appointee or not, is immediately cited as a rogue leftist. Just like the six Republican congressmen who joined in objecting to Trump's tariffs of Canada today, were immediately threatened with their jobs and assured of a primary. So it's impossible to overstate how dangerous this is and how far we've fallen. But we need to stop falling, and people basically need to figure out a way, to preserve where we are now to start to build up, because we're still falling, and it takes real vigilance and real activity to prevent that.
But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Well, I have some degree of optimism that things are turning, but I can't sugarcoat where we are. We're not on a path to fascism. We're there. And we can't ignore that or pretend otherwise, because this is not a gradual process. We've been taken from 250 years of being aspirational and providing leadership, protection, and liberty around the world to the point where we don't matter in the world. I just got back from a trip from Africa and France, and the things that people say about the United States there, it's not like what's happening to you. It's goodbye. You're gone. You no longer matter to us. We're going to find a way to run away from you as quickly as possible.
Well, Tai Cobb, I just want to say, my friend, we're very grateful for you. Thank you for joining us. But more importantly and seriously, from all defiance.org members, thank you for continuing to speak out. It matters. It makes a difference. And we're just really grateful for your leadership.
Well, you're kind to say that. I'm just doing what I can.
Thanks, friend. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
I'm going to take us into a related story. We hinted at this while talking with Ty, which is everything we're seeing happen at the Department of Justice. In some ways, it feels like it came to a head this week with the way Attorney General Pam Bondi testified, or lack thereof, in front of the United States Congress. And yesterday, she went up to Capitol Hill and appeared for an oversight hearing before the House Judiciary Committee that was supposed to be focused on the Justice Department's handling of the newly released Jeffrey Epstein files. There, she was nothing short of combative and unruly, as Ty Cobb indicated, throughout the entirety of questioning, in a way that was, a lot of folks felt, completely unprecedented. I worked on Capitol Hill for a decade. I never saw anything like that. As Republican lawmaker Thomas Massie pointed out, she actually had written insults prepared in front of her while refusing to answer detailed questions about the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files. He wrote that she shuffled through them mid-hearing to find the one that matched whichever lawmaker was questioning her, like some weird game of Cards Against Humanity, but just democracy edition. I have to say, pretty hacky and pretty tacky. But the controversy escalated when a close-up of Bondi's binder appeared to show printed search histories from Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and her review of the unredacted Epstein files, raising questions about whether the Justice Department was tracking and monitoring how Democratic lawmakers were reviewing those documents, were reviewing those sensitive records. And as the representative wrote on X, she called it a violation of separation of powers and accused the DOJ of surveilling members of Congress. Attorney General Pam Bondi's combative performance before Congress is now triggering backlash, not just from Democrats, but from prominent voices on the right. After Wednesday's hearing on the Justice Department and the handling of the Epstein files, several high-profile conservative figures publicly called for Bondi to resign or to be removed. Conservative commentator Eric Erickson wrote that Bondi should be, quote, fired or resign, arguing that her response to questions about Epstein's prosecutions was unacceptable. Even Kyle Rittenhouse posted that Bondi, quote, needs to resign. But even further to the right, if that was possible, and of significant note, were Nick Fuentes and Tim Pool, two MAGA conservative podcasters who took to their channels not only to drag Bondi, but to sow further seeds of doubt about Donald Trump himself.
Cutting Trump any slack. Now that we know that they've covered up the conspirator documents, there's a document saying that they were investigating co-conspirators Epstein. There's photos and videos of minors and children. Dan Bongino was like, look, a lot of these things were hearsay and, fake tips that were uncorroborated. All of that is true, but there's still no excuse for them not exposing these deep, dark, corrupt pedos. Like, I can understand. Yep. I can understand Bill Gates didn't do anything criminal. If it is true that he got an STD from Russian hookers and gave it to his wife on accident, that's not illegal. He got divorced. I can understand why it's embarrassing. And I can respect someone saying, please don't release that email. It's not material to anybody. It's just internal drama that's gross and embarrassing.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff in there, like that's already being brought up, that I would say is shocking to the conscience that Trump called it a hoax.
One thing is absolutely unambiguous. Some of these emails are very suggestive, but vague. And some of them are eyebrow-raising and suspicious, but they're not necessarily a smoking gun. And I think that's why we need full transparency. They need to be unredacted. We need the rest of the files. Putting that aside for just a second, here's something that we know absolutely, and this is something that people are forgetting. It's something people are overlooking. What the Trump administration said specifically about the files last year is that there were no files. Remember? This Attorney General, Pam Bondi, at the Department of Justice, she authorized a memo. She signed off on a memo that said there are no Epstein files. So they lied about that too, and they closed the case anyway. So Pam Bondi needs to be impeached. You do realize that.
I've got to say, for people who are critics of Nick Fuentes, which rightfully there are many, I will also note he is remarkably influential in the Republican Party. I think a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, I think it was a third of attendees at CPAC in one survey admitted that they were fans of Nick Fuentes. He is speaking to the MAGA base. And he is telling them he thinks the Trump administration lied and its attorney general should resign. But despite that criticism and the fractures in Trump-aligned media, there doesn't seem to be a lot of response out of Washington. In fact, the Justice Department has not yet said anything about these public calls for resignation. I bring back into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. Xander, I will say I do feel like this is significant. And I know that Ty, when we had him on a little bit ago, didn't express as much optimism as me about what might be happening in Congress with the defections. But it's not just in Congress. It is these culture figures in the MAGA movement who are now breaking away from Donald Trump. Now, in some cases, I worry that they're breaking farther right than the president. But in this case, it's about accountability and it's about their expectations of what was going to happen from this administration not being met. And there's no excuse for what's an obvious cover-up. And I've got to say, I think those defections are going to cost this president politically, and it's going to make it harder for him to continue his autocratic agenda. Ty is right. We're in the world of fascism now with this president, but he's not going to be as effective at it if his own foot soldiers are saying, man, this ain't what I signed up for.
Yeah, Miles, quick question. Percentage of Americans who want the Epstein files released. It was surprising to see folks from across the spectrum, but then I looked up the data. What's your guess? Percentage
I don't know.
Americans?
74%.
77% of Americans. You know what that's more popular than? Everything, fucking everything. It's more popular than people are concerned about the federal deficit, 71%. It's more popular than Americans who support women's reproductive rights at 72%. It is 3% more popular than Americans who are worried about safety. You know, that like Maslowian thing at the bottom of the hierarchy where we're all wired and conditioned to worry about safety. That's 3 percentage points less popular than everyone who wants to see the Epstein files released. So it was, in some ways, it's surprising to find myself in agreement with Nick Fuentes. Obviously, that part's uncomfortable, but it is just true that Americans across the spectrum see this for what it is and see this administration lying so clearly.
You know, if I had to speculate, I don't think Bondi survives the 4 years. And that's probably frustrating to Donald Trump because he really likes how loyal she is. He likes that she has done almost everything he's wanted her to. Granted, she didn't move as fast as he wanted on revenge prosecutions. And so in September, we saw his private DMs accidentally tweeted out because he's old and didn't realize he was posting a message instead of DMing her, and basically said, I need you to go faster on this. And she has complied. I mean, she has done what the president wanted. She has apparently tried to bury the Epstein files, and it was Congress that forced that issue to the fore. But he also, as we talked about earlier with Minnesota, he can't handle bad press. And if she's taking it from the left and taking it from the right and taking it from the middle, it's going to be hard for her to stay. Now, what worries me, Xander, is, I want someone like Pam Bondi gone because she has presided over the most lawless Justice Department we have ever seen in American history, without exception. Yet, who replaces her? Who's the type of person that Donald Trump says can fill her shoes and even pursue his autocratic, corrupt agenda with greater alacrity? And I don't think it's a moderate. I don't think it's someone that gives us more confidence. And so that puts us in a really weird spot is, folks want Pam Bondi gone, but what do we get in the wake of that?
I wrote this, as I was watching Fuentes speak. It's anyone but Trump on the right. Even when they do speak up, it's anyone but Trump. It's so clear that these are just loyal, unqualified foot soldiers that are doing his bidding. And I understand to a certain extent why Republicans in Congress are afraid to call that what it is, and because they're worried about retribution from the president and his followers, et cetera. It's confusing. It's a little more confusing coming from the Nick Fuentes of the world, that this reluctance to just call it what it is. I don't know. What do you think it's going to take for the right, the voices on the right? And I agree with you that Fuentes is an important voice, whether you like him or not. You probably don't if you're watching this, but he is an important voice because he's reaching an audience similar to Marjorie Taylor Greene that you and I just don't reach. And so what's your thoughts?
But here's what I think is actually good is we've got a former Trump lawyer on here earlier today, Ty Cobb, who says it looks like a major federal agency has become the Gestapo. Ty Cobb doesn't say something like that lightly. I mean, this is a renowned rule of law expert. But then you also have Joe Rogan say the same thing. That is really damning to me, that you have folks all across the spectrum saying that. Of course, folks on the left are saying that. Moderates are saying that. That, to me, feels very significant that those people are calling it what it is. 100%. Now, some of those others that you note, Xander, they're not there yet. But if Trump keeps following his instincts, they're going to get there. I mean, I have a harder time painting a picture of Trump reverting to a more normal posture that wins those folks back because he just wants to keep trying more and more extreme things. And I feel like those extreme reactions, especially the use of law enforcement in ways that will enforce his agenda, are the types of things that are going to turn off conservatives. Conservatives don't want a government so big that it can just trot into a city and do whatever it wants. They are starting to see that Donald Trump will soon be a lame duck and that the next party could come in and use those same tactics. And that's why I think for a Stephen Miller, a year like 2026 is so critical, because he sees this potentially as the last opportunity to get Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, to get Trump to deploy more troops into cities. Because if he doesn't do it this year, then next year, if it hasn't already happened, people are saying, well, do we want a Democrat to win the White House and continue this type of policy, but to turn it against Texas and turn it against Arkansas and turn it against Oklahoma? No, we don't really want that. And so, like I said earlier, I think there's real tension inside the administration over this because the real hardliners want the president to keep going deep into the paint to do these extreme things. And it makes it a bit of a make or break year.
Yeah. And maybe, look, if Bondi's out, someone else comes in and those policies continue, maybe you then do start to see that attribution to the top from across the spectrum and say, okay, it's a different face, but we're seeing the exact same playbook play out here. Clearly, This is top-down direction and not just a, secretary or leader gone wild.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to take us, Xander, into our final segment of the day and every day, which is who is joining the Defiance? Because a lot of people are joining the Defiance. I didn't think that Nick Fuentes and Tim Pool would join the Defiance. We haven't officially labeled them as having joined it. But sure as shit, they seem to be headed that way. In today's Who is Joining the Defiance, I'll open by just saying this. Religious leaders often ask others to repent. Think about their sins, acknowledge their sins, decide to be better. You almost never see one stand in front of the public and admit that they were wrong. But that's exactly what this former right-wing minister just did. Weeks ago, he joined the people of Minneapolis in the streets and showed a clear change of heart. Take a look.
I'm making up for errors of my past. I spent 35 years as an activist on the religious right, doing a lot of damage, helping to deliver the entities that are now inflicting all of this suffering on so many people, and in the process contradicting in every possible way the message I thought I was promoting in those years, but in fact I was doing the opposite. Our street, our street, our street, our street, our street, our street, our street. So now I have to do the work of repair. And it came too late, and I have what time I have, but I want to do that repair, and just being present here and being in solidarity with all these folks is part of that repair work in my own soul, but more importantly, in the external world where people have to live with the consequences of my decades of harm and injury. So I have to own that, and it's painful, but I have found the folks here more gracious than any of the so-called Christian leaders that I kept company with in those years that I thought up myself as being. These folks are showing more grace in accepting me and inviting me to walk with them than I would have ever extended to them 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. This is redemption. This is redemption. In the big picture and in my tiny little small personal picture.
Xander, I want to talk about this one because you and I don't talk on this program a lot about faith, but I will just say in the church that I go to, I am seeing this a lot. I'm seeing this a lot is people of faith who had spent their whole lives on the conservative Christian right, watching what's happening and saying, I can't stand by this anymore. I mean, I'm seeing pastors in our ecosystem, in our church, completely changing their approach and just shocked by all the things that are happening, shocked by the imagery coming out of Minnesota, shocked by the disregard for American citizens and American lives and the lives of people who want to be American citizens. I feel a sea change in communities of faith. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but I thought that minister's comment about redemption was really powerful, because that's something that we've been talking about, is that the political opposition in this country needs to have an attitude of redemption to expand the tent, to bring in those people from the far right, from MAGA communities who are saying, I can't be a part of this anymore.
Yeah, it's such a great reminder, even hearing that from him, that how quickly your heart does melt and you do open up to people that you feel you are in deep opposition to when you see that type of humility. We're all exposed to different facts, different social pressures. I mean, especially as a pastor where you've been leading with a narrative for a while, and now you've got to go back to that group and say, hey, I was wrong. You trusted me as a leader and I was wrong. I was leading you in the wrong direction. But what a powerful thing for that guy to be doing. What an inspiration. It is a good reminder. We need to make sure we are there to receive them in open arms, even if it's challenging at times. I was just thinking, as we were talking about what was going on with DHS, we're probably going to start seeing some ICE agents as people join the Defiance soon. A lot of these guys thought they were joining to be a hero. They thought there was thousands of MS-13 cells throughout the country, right? We can't underestimate the difference in info that these people are getting. And they probably thought they were going to get the military treatment. When they get on an airplane, they board first and people applaud them. There's a lot of people who bought into that story and now are beating up people with phones over the last few months. And we're probably going to see some of them. And they're going to be powerful voices too. As much as,
Well, and I think we already have seen some of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
we don't know who these ICE whistleblowers are. Defiance.org members have supported a number of different legal defense efforts, and one of them is a group that we talk about all the time, Whistleblower Aid. And there was a huge bombshell disclosure in January from Whistleblower Aid. Is at least 2 ICE employees, and they might have been ICE agents, Xander, came forward and said something very rotten is happening in the agency. They're training the newbies to violate the Fourth Amendment on purpose. That was a huge issue. And I will just say, again, hat tip to Defiance.org members. This is the real shit that we do. Going and funding that legal defense makes it possible for those people to come forward. And Xander, I think you're right. I think as this gets worse, you're going to see more of those people in ICE, in the United States military, in other agencies come forward and say, I can't put up with this anymore. I got to sound the alarm, either with whistleblower protections or just coming forward publicly. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, were it not for those 2 people, I'm not sure we would be having the same debate right now in Congress with Democrats saying, we demand changes to these warrantless entries. And again, I have to laud our audience, our following, and our members, because that's what makes a difference. You go support groups that say, we'll have those people's backs. Those people then have the courage to come forward and say, you know what, it looks like I'm going to have support. And then there's real demands for change. You got a whole Democratic opposition in Congress saying, we're not going to fund that department until they fix this. That matters. The little things people are doing right now are adding up.
Yeah, and so on top of the legal defense that supports these people and the challenges they're going to face, our reaction, just as everyday people, celebrating these people as they come back into the tent, also matters. Feeling like you're going to be a cultural pariah that doesn't belong in 1 or 2 camps is scary. And so Rev Rob Shank, I know some people are asking, saying Reverend Rob Shank.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even say his name.
No, it's all right. Reverend Rob Shank, he said it, that he's being welcomed with open arms in a way that he probably wouldn't have done 10, 15 years ago. We got to keep doing that, because the more people know that there's a safe home for them, not just with legal protection, but culturally, the more we're going to see that type of defection that we need.
Yeah, and I will say it's so much bigger than people who are still in the political party dynamic. This moment is not about, can we get all these people to become Democrats? It is so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. And when I go out and speak around the country, Xander, I have to have that conversation with folks a lot. Is they're like, well, why don't all these people become Democrats? I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you right now, give up your fantasy that your party will take over after Trump and be in power forever. That's the same stupid fantasy that Steve Bannon had about the MAGA movement. I will not forget his quotes from last year about, I think we're going to govern for 50 years. Dude, open a textbook. You're not going to govern for 50 years. And I'm also going to say the same thing to Democrats. Give up the fantasy that somehow in the wake of Trumpism, the Democrats will rule forever and we'll have single party rule. Not going to happen. That's not the point. The point here is That's right. Let's all go back to operating under the same set of rules, the
Yes.
U.S. Constitution. And sometimes that means your team wins and does things that you are thrilled about. Sometimes the other team wins, but they're not violating your underlying civil rights. They're not violating that. That's what this coalition is about right now. So I love that the Reverend talked about redemption. That's what we have to show. Even when we're talking about folks you can't stand, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Clap her coming onto that plane for standing up to this guy. Ooh, it may be hard to do. You may have to bite your tongue, but that's the difference between us getting another 10 and 10,000 MAGA people to defect and not. So I agree with the redemption piece. I think it's so powerful. It's been powerful throughout history. It's how we grow this defiance, my brother.
Yeah, this is that scene in. Oh,
yeah, we're
can you
here.
hear me still? All right.
Yeah. Tell us the scene. I need to know.
This is the scene from Independence Day where the aliens invade and all the countries come together. That's what fascism is. Fascism is when we all come together and go, all right, we might have our differences, but this other thing wants to kill us all. Let's come together, defeat this, and then we can go back to debating how the world should be operated.
We need to ask our producer, Mercedes, we need clips from Independence Day right now. Hurry, go, go.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. She's like, there's no way I'm going to pull that up. Let's take some questions from defiance.org members. And as we get ready to, Xander, feel free to take a look at the questions and jump into the first one. Let me just say for folks, if you're a defiance.org member, you can ask questions there on Substack, and please throw some into the chat. If you are not a defiance.org member, take a look. This is what this whole thing is about, baby. It is about us funding real actions every single week to counter Donald Trump's abuses of power. We don't do this because Xander and I are going to get rich off of doing this. We don't do this because this is the future that we wanted for ourselves, is to build a resistance effort. We would have much rather things be normal and boring in the United States. Well, this is where we are at. And this is where thousands of you are at right now, as you are with us in this fight, because it is urgent. So take a look at defiance.org if you haven't. You can also sign up to join us via Substack on defiance.news and chip in. And every single week, we go fund actions, real things to push back against Trump's abuses of power. And just in these short 3.5 months that we've existed, just go look at our main page, scroll down, see some of the things that we've accomplished as a club. And it's pissing Donald Trump off. And that is not stopping us. It will not stop us. And he was furious that we launched the fight against federal overreach. He was, oh no, here we go.
Yes.
Let's take a pause.
What's he doing? Come on, baby.
That's Independence Day. It holds up, man. It
I'm
holds
personally
up.
partial to Will Smith just punching the alien in the head.
Yeah. That one's a good one too. We'll probably bring that as a clip that we can queue up, whenever we need it. Is punching the alien. But look, take a look at defiance.org, folks. Come join us. Let's take some questions from our members. Xander, what you got?
Yeah, just real quick before I move on, I'll say, Miles, the last 3 months has felt the best I've felt, honestly, since 2016, since we started dealing with Trump, because the conversations we have are about proactivity. What can we do? Rowing together to make it better. And, in a world of shock punditry, it's just really nice to have those conversations. That conversation we had yesterday, how much hope that gave me, seeing 5 people. I don't think anyone was over 35. Most were in their 20s. That we're building incredible infrastructure to not only win this moment, but build a better, more responsive government for the people. So it's just been an honor to have those conversations. Honestly, been great for my mental health. So I just want to share that to anyone who's thinking about joining. You'll feel better. It feels better being a part of this.
Yeah, we're not selling you snake oil, man. It's because we took this and it worked. We took this miracle weight loss drug and it worked.
All right, I'll get to the question now.
Go, Miles.
Go.
No, I was just going to say, one of the member questions in there is Cheryl Driscoll asks, when are member meetings and how do we access them? Look, if you're a member of defiance.org, once a month on Wednesdays, and we just did one last Wednesday. Once a month on Wednesdays, we do members only meetings. We do them on Zoom, and we get a couple of hundred of us in a Zoom, and we talk about the direction of the club. We talk about how we're going to fight back against Trump. We talk about the types of things we want to fund, and then we go do it. And then every Wednesday besides that, we announce the actions that we're going to take. So yesterday, for instance, when we brought on people who are getting the youth to run for elected office against MAGA candidates and people who are doing young people get out the vote. We did that because our members, we got together on one of our meetings, I think at the one in December, and folks were like, we want to prioritize youth organizing ahead of the midterms. We want to make sure that the young people are the firewall against fascism. And so we found pretty much the 5 best people doing that in the country. We're helping to fund them. We're helping to amplify their actions. We're building partnerships to do that. And so, Cheryl, that's the answer to the question. You can join us on Wednesdays once a month to help shape that direction we're going. And then we go out there and we do that action. And I was going to add, Xander, you said it's been good for your mental health. I'm telling you, that's the only thing that got me and Hannah out of our funk after Trump blew up our lives again. No one's got to play the violin for me. You don't need me to, recite that sob story. But like everything in our lives just under a year ago was completely upended. Our closest friends, our business, our life, our security, all of it because this guy tried to tear us down. And we got out of that funk because we decided, well, let's fight back. And that's what we're trying to do, is to give people that feeling of doing something real to fight back. And I will say, brother, I am incredibly proud of what's been accomplished. You and I think it's obvious to our club members, we're not getting enough sleep. But it's not because we're down. It's because we're so amped about this. And that goes for Mercedes too. No one here is sleeping. We'll probably take a couple of days off for the program sometime in the next few weeks just to make sure that the team goes to bed.
Although she does send great news clips out at like 1 a.m.
Pretty sure it was 2 a.m. Eastern that we got that thing last night. Yeah, 2 a.m. Eastern. I was still getting messages from the team. They're like, and this, and we could do this. It was like, well, we do actually have to sleep at some point.
It's the world's most terrifying news feed. It wakes you up in the middle of the night.
That's right. C.R. Burnett asks, how deep is the Trump bench for appointing sycophantic lackeys? I love that question. Wouldn't he eventually have to appoint someone less than a completely loyal to his agenda, even to get approved by Congress at this point? C.R., this is a great question. I wish I could give you an optimistic answer, like Donald Trump has run out of sycophantic lackeys to put into these jobs. I don't really think he has. And the place that I am most concerned about that happening right now is the place that our guest who was on today knows a great deal about, which is the Justice Department. And he said, Ty Cobb said he was worried about the direction the Justice Department's going. But the past couple of weeks, we have seen DOJ start to literally advertise on Twitter. A former chief of staff of the Justice Department started tweeting out, hey, DM me if you want to become a United States attorney and advance Trump's agenda. Just to be clear for people, if you don't know what U.S. attorneys do, they enforce the law for all Americans. They're the ones that bring prosecutions against criminals and murderers and rapists and drug cartels. They're not supposed to bring prosecutions to advance the president's agenda. Even though an administration gets to nominate people to be U.S. attorneys, they're supposed to come in to just prosecute criminals to protect all of us. That's what worries me, is they're trying to go find more people like Lindsay Halligan, who was the prosecutor that Trump put in to prosecute James Comey and Letitia James and his enemies, and who was booted out of the Eastern District of Virginia. They want people like her in every single U.S. attorney's office in America to bring revenge prosecutions, political prosecutions. If that succeeds, if they put lackeys in those jobs, then 2025 was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. And we're going to see that Justice Department doing some very scary things around the country. Now, the system's pushing back, judges are pushing back, Americans are pushing back, but that could get pretty scary for us. So I do worry, CR, about things going that direction. However, it is counterbalanced by the fact that there are checks in our system. And we saw this week that even if they put a Jeanine Pirro in as the prosecutor in Washington, D.C., and they try to bring charges to jail Democrats who criticize the president, well, there's a check in the system. Grand juries are made up of American citizens, not political flunkies and lackeys. And those American citizens on that grand jury said, hell no, we're not going to bring political charges against these people. And that gives me some optimism.
Miles, part of their question was, can the future candidates be approved by Congress at this point? You wrote in your second book about how Trump had found this loophole using acting secretaries. I think it was Chris Krebs that was serving for 18 months when there was a limit on kind of 6 months. Can you expand on how he was exploiting that loophole?
Yeah, well, it was Chad Wolf, actually, who was
Chad Wolf,
acting Secretary of Homeland Security for about a year and a half and well beyond the tenure he was supposed to. And basically no one challenged it. It eventually got challenged in federal court, and Chad had to step down. But Trump liked putting people in acting positions. He didn't like confirmed cabinet secretaries and confirmed U.S. attorneys because he felt like he had something he could lord over them.
Mm-hmm.
And that may sound banal to a lot of people listening. They're like, well, if you're in one of those jobs, what do you care if you're the secretary or the acting secretary? Let me tell you about these people's egos in Washington. They care a lot. They don't want acting in front of their title. Or there's an even worse one. If you're the acting deputy secretary at most departments, technically you can't call yourself that. You're the official performing the duties of the deputy secretary. You don't want to put that on a resume.
That's long
they want
on
to be
LinkedIn. That sucks.
They want to be the deputy secretary. They want to be the acting. And so by not putting them forward, Donald Trump gets to dangle it in front of them. You know, if you do everything I want, if you're really loyal, then maybe I'll officially nominate you and you'll get the job. It's this really sick game he plays by dangling the carrot and the stick in front of these people who are in his administration. And I suspect, Xander, that that's what we'll see more of as the administration goes on. This will happen like it did in the first term, is that he started off with a largely confirmed cabinet that the U.S. Senate approved of, even barely in some cases. And steadily those people will be pushed out and fired. And he'll say, you know, I don't want to try to get more of them confirmed. And if Democrats retake the House or the Senate, he's like, I don't want to mess with that. I'm just going to put acting people in these jobs, and I'm going to ignore the judges when they tell me I've got to remove them.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly works. You keep calling me your acting co-host on the show, and it is working.
I know.
My desire for your approval keeps going up and up.
Yeah. Xander's just acting. And Mercedes is the official performing the duties of the producer. We're not going to give her the title until she does 10 more Independence Day
She doesn't sleep
clips.
at all.
Yeah.
She's still catching a couple hours.
Let's take a final question before we jump. Let's see. We've got Sass Writer asks, please, can we have our weekly action items on Defiance site in text form and shareable, like a running list, not videos we can easily access and share? Sass Writer, I'm glad you asked that question because we've probably not been very good in telling people we do. If you go to defiance.news and you go under action alerts, all of the actions that we list each week, we post the video and we also put them in text form. So take a look. If you're a member of defiance.org, that's a members only section of the site. Just go to defiance.news, go down to action. And then each week when we announce the actions of the week, we will post the video. But then right under that, we'll post the text version, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the actions for the week. Take a look at that. If you have feedback on that, let us know. We are always iterating, changing, and updating it. And we would love to make that more accessible for folks. And we're going to be getting around to it in Q1 of this year, that we're eventually going to be launching this new hub that Xander and some of you have been beta testing, a Defiance HQ that makes it really easy to go in and like click off the actions you've taken each week and you can earn points. We're trying to make that more fun and more dynamic. But in the meantime, all of our content is right there at defiance.news. So check it out there, and we'll post those usually the day after our weekly mission brief so that you've got those there. But that's what we got today. Xander, I will just remind folks that tomorrow on Defiance Daily, we have 2 guests coming to join us. We have Mark Zaid, who is the world-class, nationally recognized attorney who has been one of the ones leading this case that has to do with Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, this whistleblower complaint that she has been refusing to send to Congress. We will have Mark Zaid on talking about exactly that. And we also have Mary Corcoran on, who helps run the Save America movement, to talk about a campaign they have just launched to hold Donald Trump's corporate enablers accountable and to hold some of the Epstein co-conspirators accountable. So come join for that conversation tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, folks, as always, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together.